Welcome. Today we will cover how to upload and turn in your file to your Office through DotLoop when using CTM as your e-contract system. First, we will start by logging into ctmecontracts.com to download the executed contract form. If you have any trouble logging into the CTM system, you'll need to contact CTM support. Once you've logged into the system, to download a file, you'll want to click on the client's name and then click on the file that you'd like to upload or download and then upload into DotLoop. After you've opened up the file, to download the PDF, at the top right, you'll click PDF Print. When you click that, it will open up a PDF of the file that you're able to then download to your computer. To download this, at the top right, you'll click on the down arrow, and this will open up a navigation field that allows you to save the file wherever you'd like on your computer. Where you save this and what you title it does not matter as long as you know what you titled it and you know where you saved it. After you have saved this to your computer, then you want to repeat this step for all of the different files needed for Office compliance. After you downloaded all of those documents, then the next step is you'll want to log into DotLoop to upload the files and submit the loop to the Office for review. You can open DotLoop two ways. One, by going to dotloop.com and logging in using your DotLoop account information. The other way is by going to mykw.com and logging in through the KW intranet. And then up inside the eEdge control panel, you'll click on Start My Transactions. And when you click on Start My Transactions, it will open the main DotLoop screen. The first time you log into DotLoop, make sure your screen is black and red. If it is blue and white, contact your MCA before moving forward, as you need to be connected to the Office. Now, to create a loop inside of DotLoop to turn into the Office, you'll scroll down and click the plus sign. This will open up the Create a Loop field. You'll want to name your loop, which should include three separate things, which is your client's name, the address, and the type of deal it is. For example, in this circumstance, my client, Sean Spencer, is a buyer who is putting an offer in and purchasing 555 Main Street. Then after I have named this loop, then down below that, I need to select what type of deal this is and what template I want. It includes things like land purchases, buyer, seller, referral, all the different types of deals you would normally do. Also, for buyers and sellers, you have the type if you're using DotLoop as your e-contract system, but in this circumstance, we're talking about if you're using CTME as your e-contract system. So I'm going to select buyer residential sale using CTME. Then you click Create a Loop. This will open up the loop in all the different folders. All of the loops will have 4 different folders. You will have your buyer documents or listing documents. Essentially, the very top folder is all of the documents that are the relationship between you and your client, the buyer or seller. The second folder is your under contract documents. This is the relationship between your client and the other party involved. So your contract to buy and sell between your buyer and the seller, or your seller and the buyer. Then the third folder is the closing documents. This will include everything that comes from title during the closing process. And then the fourth one is your transaction records. The transaction records are all of the file items that you would need to keep, but the Office does not care about for compliance. This might include things like your email correspondence back and forth between you and your client, or the title commitment, or the HOA documents. HOA documents are not required for compliance review of the Office, but they are something that is good for you to keep in your records. So the transaction records folder is essentially all the extra stuff that you should keep, but the Office does not need to approve your file. The other thing that you'll notice is that there are placeholders underneath each of these sections for the different required documents in a deal. So in our circumstance where we have the pretend buyer, you can see that the buyer advisory is labeled required. That is because every single deal that you do where you're representing a buyer, you are required to have a buyer advisory. Then you'll also see some files are labeled optional. The optional does not necessarily mean that you can only turn it in if you feel like it. What it actually means is this might not apply to every situation. For example, if you have a home that is built pre-1978, you need to include the lead-based paint disclosure. And even though that is labeled optional down here, that does not mean if the home is pre-1978, you don't need to turn it in. You still have to turn it in. It just might not apply to every single situation. Now, to add a document to the file, you can add it two different ways. One, you can add the file by hovering your mouse over the word required or optional, and you'll see then it pops up add file. When I click on add file, then it asks me what way I'd like to do that, from computer or templates, and we're going to select computer. And then that will open up the navigation field where then you can go and find that file you saved to your computer. And then once I select that file and click open, you'll see that it adds that document to my loop and renames it to the proper name. The other way that you can add a document to your loop is when I was downloading all of those different PDFs, at the very bottom you can see that most browsers will add the file as a PDF down at the bottom underneath your downloads, and you can actually click that file and drag it up into the loop, and it will add and rename that file also. So those are the two separate ways that you can add documents when you're using a placeholder. Now, sometimes you may have a file that you want to add in here that is not a placeholder item, like what we mentioned before with the HOA documents, where you're coming down below and you want to add that to the transaction records, but there's no placeholder. So to add a document that does not have a placeholder, you would click Add Document, and then you could browse your computer for that item and insert it in. Now, when this happens, it will not rename the file. You will actually have to, on the far right with the three dots, click there and click rename to then call this the HOA documents or whatever the item is that you added, so that you're able to distinguish later what that file is. So after you have added everything to the loop that you need to add, you want to turn this file into the office. Now, you will want to turn in the file to the office multiple times. What this means is the buyer documents or seller documents, the agreement between you and your client, that folder should be turned into the office within 4 days of you executing that relationship between you and your client. The under contract documents should be submitted and turned into the office at least 10 days prior to closing to ensure that you get paid at closing. And then the closing documents should all be turned into the office within 4 days of the closing. And the transaction records never need to be turned into the office. So every single deal, you should be submitting your file and a folder to the office at least 3 times throughout a deal. And sometimes maybe even more if a file is returned back to you for having a missing piece. So whenever you are ready to turn in a folder to the office to submit it, you're going to scroll up to the very top and click Submit for Review. Then you'll have to enter in the property information. So I'm going to enter in our fake information on this 555 Main Street in Littleton, Colorado. And then I'll click Next. On this screen, this is when I get to select what file I'm turning into the office. And like I said, you'll be turning it in multiple times. You'll turn in the buyer documents, then you'll turn in the under contract documents at a later date, and then the closing documents after closing. So if I select the buyer documents, then before I click submit, I might have a note that I need to send to compliance. So anything that is noted underneath why are you submitting for review, will actually go to compliance as a note that they can read and reference as they're reviewing your documents. If you ever have a document that is required, yet for some reason it did not apply to your deal, then you do need to make a note of that here so that compliance understands why that document is not there. And then you'll click Submit. After you've selected Type, then you'll click Submit. Now, one thing that you can see is on the under contract documents to the left, it says not submitted. But on the buyer documents that I just submitted, it's now changed to compliance review. This is how you know that it has officially been turned into the office, because the status of the workflow has changed to compliance review. And as the loop moves throughout your office, it will change statuses, which will let you know where it is in the workflow of your office. Every office is a little bit different, and so you can talk to your MCA if you have any questions about the workflow. If the file is ever returned back to you and changes to return to agent, after you have made the changes that compliance has asked you to make, whether it's adding an extra document or getting a signature that maybe was missed, then you still have to go up to the top right, click Submit for Review again to have that status change back to compliance review. If you do not resubmit to the office, your compliance department does not see or know to review that loop. Now, when trying to submit for review, if you are missing any required documents, it will not allow you to submit. It will actually give you an error message. So if you do ever have a circumstance where a required document is not included, for example, we have inspection objection notice here noted as required, but maybe the inspection happened and your buyer is not wanting to object to anything, then you need to make sure that you have actually archived that file. And to archive, you would come over to the far right to the three dots, click that, and then click Archive. And then that will allow you to submit to the office. Now, of course, anytime you archive a required document and don't include it, you would want to always include an explanation to compliance to why it was not there. Something as simple as, no inspection objection happened because we did not object to any items. Now, after you have submitted your under contract documents, meaning your client is getting to the closing table, you'll also need to submit a green sheet to the office, which lets the MCA know how the commission is split for the deal. If you have any questions on green sheets, watch the How to Submit a Green Sheet video or talk with your MCA. If you have any questions about DotLoop and this uploading process, talk with compliance or your MCA.